guys, we have a question from one of our clients, and they asked, how can posture alignment therapy reduce the risk of falls?
Yeah, good
They
question.
know it can.
Yeah.
They said
Indeed.
how, so they know it
Yeah.
can. So they're off to a good start.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we see all kinds of postural issues which relate. And so, I mean, just a simple, from a biomechanical standpoint, just thinking of center of gravity. So, like if somebody is offset one direction or if they're leaned forward, a certain direction, something like kyphosis even is going to, push the weight distribution forward. So now your center of gravity is forward over the ball of the foot. So that means like people are already like shifting and maybe stumbling forward. That can lead to falls, forward. And one of the big things with risk of falls is just catching yourself, being able to stop momentum.
Yeah, I have a few clients that have come in because they're like, I'm worried about falling. Like I walk my dog, and every time I walk my dog, I'm like, I'm always stressed that I'm going to lose my balance or I'm going to fall. Or they're older, and that's just a concern for them. But yeah, exactly. Center of gravity, and just you can see with people when the way they're standing, where are they already in that disposition to put them at a higher risk? Because if I'm standing and if my head is pulled in front, just levers and pulleys, my head is the furthest apart from the floor, it's going to have the greatest pull to pulling me towards the floor. So I'm going to have a harder time keeping upright. So it can definitely help.
Yeah, and with the head position too, looking from the side view, we've all seen those, pictures where the, head is forward and for every, I forget how many degrees it is, but for certain, every measure of degrees forward, then it's putting more stress onto the neck. And of course, those neck muscles also go to the thoracic spine. So that's a big one. And then when we look from the front and back views also, then we can just look at the head position and see if the head tilts is there, or if a head is offset or something, then we know their center of gravity between right and left is off. And I would say that's a big one for us, is the asymmetry between the two sides. And people commonly have a dominant side or a non-dominant side. And that usually translates into an elevated hip or a hip pelvic tilt disparity, where one, hip one side is tilted more than the other. And then that's changing how the back muscles are working. And so if you, again, you have this little shift of equilibrium or changing environments as you're walking or getting in and out of the car, or, going up and down stairs, or if it's a slippery surface or something like that, then the ability to, catch yourself from right and left differences, or just to be able to, navigate the different terrain and so forth, all that becomes off, because it's a guessing game as to like, okay, what muscles are going to do this job if they're out of position and unable to work properly. Like in a normal, like let's say you walk on a treadmill all the time, great. And some people you even see they're like holding on the whole time, or they're doing an elliptical machine where their feet are grounded the whole time. That's completely different and doesn't challenge the, vestibular system, doesn't challenge the kinesthetic proprioceptive, system as much as far as balance. And so then when they get into other environments, they're like, well, I've been going to the gym, I've been doing exercise. Well, why isn't it translating? Well, because we have to actually, fix the body going into those activities and have it ready to navigate those spaces, which again comes back to alignment. So the muscle balance is there. And then it's like, okay, now it's at least ready, or it's been active previously. So now going into that environment, those muscles are, they're already on, versus like, okay, turn on when I need you right now, when I'm falling.
Yeah.
I think besides just, weight distribution and muscles, the length tension being off, a big piece is proprioception, because a lot of clients, like say if you have an everted foot or a really supinated pronated foot, your foot strike is, you're not going to hit the floor in the right way that the proprioceptors turn on your glutes to help extend your leg, and you're never going to get a good push off, so you're not going to move through space the same. So you might not have a real drop foot, but essentially you're going to have this sort of one lame leg, just because the nerves aren't getting the right signal to turn on the right muscles. So it is more just than, oh, am I shifted? Can I like really visually see this shift? It could be, slight little variations, slight rotations. Like there's so many things that happen within our body that are automatic and that should be automatic. And just, one turned out foot can turn half of those things off.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And kind of going along with like the turned out foot, if then I'm thinking about how is the position of the hips? Like are the hips tilted forward? Are the femurs turned out? Then that's putting me in a compromised position to even pick my leg up, like lift my knee up, flex my hip to catch myself if I'm stumbling forward. Then I'm kind of turning out. I'm not able to pick my feet up. I'm not actually going to be moving the direction to catch myself. If my hip is forward, if my femurs are turned out. So if I'm falling forward, I won't catch myself forward. I'll try to catch myself kind of going sideways, if that makes sense. If I'm thinking of lines of movement and limits of range of motion. Yeah, it's I don't know. It makes sense to me. Like when I think of everything, like, as if it should be moving structure. If the wheels are forward, we should be rolling forward, but the wheels are turned out. Like, will I actually catch myself forward?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And like I think of that and usually we'll explain that to a lot of clients that like those feet turned out, just it seems like such a small thing, but those are training wheels, right? Those are trying to keep you laterally stable. But like, I have a 6-year-old daughter and she was riding a bike. We never used training wheels because she was on one of, a pedalless bike and then went to the pedals right away and like got it because she understood that momentum was her friend. But she also knew like, you knew how to stay straight versus like all this wobbliness. She's also a little speed demon, but that helps when you're, going on a straight line. But the idea with the feet, I think that just going back to that and Carrie Ann's point too, with the proprioception, is like that's what gets ingrained and that's what gets trained. It's also, people we're all wearing too much shoe. So one of the things that we advise people is to wear less shoe or go barefoot, especially when they're doing their postural exercises and so forth, because we do want to train. We're very meticulous about foot position during the exercises, because that's where we need to train you. And then we also need to train all those nerve receptors, the tens of thousands of nerve receptors that are on the bottom of the foot that are supposed to be planting and actually like gripping and grabbing and staying grounded on the floor as we step and as we move. And that just is such a lost thing to much of our society.
I will speak to a little bit. We touched on like the vestibular balance. I have a client who head tilt was not her issue. She's very tilted. And I always think of her because in every picture I take, I tilt, but that's more of like my personality rather than me walking that way. But she's tilted and she stays that way. And there were a lot of things going on. She came in for pudendal nerve pain and bladder issues, which is, very different from balancing. And she wasn't somebody that had a major balance issue. However, actually, when we started to get her hips and everything in alignment, her head started to straighten. Now, she didn't start tripping. It didn't mess up her balance, but what it did mess up is her vision. And she had to change the actual like prescription of her glasses because if you're she had astigmatism and they were written for her eye to always be higher. And when her head came down, they had to change her prescription. So it's so interesting how we really are just like a foundation. We're just a pile of rocks. And if you move one rock out and everything shifts, it really does change everything. So that is just, that's we're all connected story, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. And it's a good reminder because the three balance mechanisms that we primarily think of are, the visual, which is one. So a lot of people, that's a simple test we do, like, close your eyes and just stand there. Like there's a lot of people who can't do that. So that's a good test you could do. Like if you could just stand there and like how much sway do you feel? Hold on to something if you're not used to that. And then also like a single leg stance where it's like, okay, balance on one leg, holding up the other leg. Can you do that for 10 seconds? Because that's been shown in studies to relate to longevity. It's a longevity marker. And of course, for as we're getting older and for older folks over 65, let's say, there's a statistic there of people who fall, break their hip, that break their femur, then the mortality rates are actually high. So there's visual, and then there's vestibular, which is the inner ear. So that's like if the head is off, then the fluid that's in the ears is actually going to not help us in that sense because it's off. It's like if you had a level and you're doing carpentry and your bubble was off and it was telling it was level, but everything was at 10-degree shift. It's like, well, this house is never going to be straight, right? So it's because of the bubble is off. So that's what happens in our inner ear. It's like that's supposed to be calibrated to level and give us constant feedback on what that is. And then there's also the kinesthetic proprioceptive aspect of it too. So the three balance mechanisms, visual, vestibular, and then kinesthetic or proprioceptive sense of awareness.
I have a client, and it's so interesting because that's something he's never thought of, was like his feet. And he's like a very active guy, very athletic, goes to the gym. He had stopped running because of the pain in his back and his feet, and he wears shoes all the time. Like he has indoor shoes that he wears all the time. And it was one thing of like checking out his posture. I was like, well, let me see what your feet look like. And I don't know. It's almost like Victorian times, like no one had seen his feet. It was like he took off his shoes, and it was just really high arches and like feet turned out though. So it's usually you see like feet turned out and like flat foot, but very high arches. And it was like, when have you last gotten your feet checked? It's like, do you have support for your feet? Like when you walk, do you have like a high arch support if you need it? Do you ever walk barefoot? And he says no. When he walks barefoot, his feet hurt a lot. So he always just wears shoes all the time. And now he's at the point where he can actually walk barefoot around the house, and it feels weird to wear shoes indoors. And he's kind of like I've never felt these things before because his feet have like never really touched the floor. And I was like, yeah, try walking outside on grass or like walking on sand and see how that feels. And it's just interesting how much like his world has been opened, because now he has like this sense that he's never really used, because we have so many like nerves and proprioceptors on the bottoms of our feet that we're unaware of. It's suddenly it's like he's like, wow, yeah, I can feel the floor. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's so awesome.